Welcome to the 4&Co Podcast. Today
Welcome.
we have us.
Yeah.
So today I think we wanted to focus on the mystery of how do you decide if a co-working space is good for you as a company or as a team, and how do you decide if you renew your existing lease that you have or downsize your existing lease or completely move out and go into a co-working space,
Right.
and what makes the most sense for you and your team.
So post-COVID, life changed for all of us, not just personal lives, but our work lives especially. And I think what has happened has really made the entire world reevaluate what office space is, what it means, what's necessary, what's not necessary. We saw this huge footprint being removed out of the corporate world where they no longer wanted to hold as much space. It was an opportunity to downsize in the amount of office space that was out there, and what you're paying for is overhead. It was also a demand that employees were making, going, I like working from home. This is pretty cool. And we all have enjoyed that aspect of it. I think because of our background and being able to have worked remotely previous life before co-working world. My husband and I had travel agency, and the boys grew up with that environment. So they were very used to working remote and understood the intricacies of it and the pitfalls as well as the great things. So everyone loves working in their pajamas and not having to get up and get dressed and go to work, but everyone hates working in their pajamas at this point because it also means that you've now become antisocial. You don't want to get dressed or do anything, and you recognize in many cases it's not necessarily the healthiest lifestyle for you. But you don't necessarily know how to break out of that mold. Now, that's a whole other topic, but that is part of what happens in the corporate world today. So we're seeing this very tug-of-war that's going on between companies and employees. Employees mostly going, I like having the freedom of being from home and being able to do what I want, when I want, how I want. And companies saying, wait a minute, we still need a cohesive team and workforce, and we need to monitor sometimes activity and make sure you actually are working and not just saying you are. Or sometimes there's real tasks that need to get accomplished and there's a deadline, so let's get this done. So they're saying, please come back into the office. And how do we make this better and more fun? And how do we attract you as an employee to come in and want to work in the office?
But then there's also the flip side of that, of companies saying, well, now that we're all working from home, we have an extra 20,000, 30,000, whatever amount of space available that isn't never being used anymore. And how do we make our office make sense for us again? How do we know we need an office, we know we need a central place for all of us. How do we make that work? And I think coming out of it, a lot of smart companies, and I would say companies that kind of saw the writing on the wall, have adopted co-working spaces, right? And I think the next evolution of that is, how do huge companies that are in the Fortune 500 list, that are 100 employees or bigger, right? How do they make the best out of their office space? And I think that comes down to turning their headquarters into their own co-working space for themselves, and making their space more revitalized and getting rid of the how many people can we cram into a space, because that's no longer the issue anymore. It's how do we get people back into the office is the issue. And I think that needs to be the center of conversation for a lot of companies, is what's going to make people want to come back into the office? What makes people want to go to co-working spaces? And I think a lot of that comes down to the environment itself. Surprise, surprise. Environment affects humans'
Oh yeah,
ability
and it goes
to.
back to, I mean, you kind of been coining this more or less recently, your 3-step program of how do you make anything successful. You communicate, you plan, and what's the last one?
Oh, you should know this. It's organize.
Organize.
The one
There
thing
it
you're
is.
not good at.
That's
Surprise,
exactly
Hence
you
why
forgot
somebody
it.
was forgetting it.
Probably didn't forget to communicate.
Well, yeah, we all have our strengths and our weaknesses.
I'm good at communication, and I like to be good at communication.
That's not good communication.
Bubba's a good communicator. Bubba knows exactly what to say, when to say it. I need to go out. He lets us know.
And I think a lot of it is getting into a co-working space is easy. Starting a co-working space, relatively easy. when you look at the traditional model.
Yeah.
The way we went about it, not so easy. By building your location and going from the ground up, expanding your second location, and
Each
doing
space
it,
being designer oriented and
yeah,
having feng shui to it and purpose and an actual functionality out of it rather than just like you said pack sardines in there and see how many people we can get,
Right.
because that is the objective rather than how do I make my team more effective by having the environment that you speak of
So we
to
have
conduce that.
had a couple of examples in our facilities where we had one company came in just after COVID, or I should say just really during COVID. They had 60,000 square feet of their own space, and they downsized to less than 600 square feet in our space. And they didn't drop employees. They just allowed them to work remotely because
Mhm.
only a handful of them actually needed office space that their homes weren't conducive to it. But in the process of that, they found that they really didn't need all of that. And it, for them, turned out to be a good thing. They stayed with us for about a year and a half, 2 years, I think maybe. And then they decided that they actually did need a little more office space than what they thought they did because it was now coming out of COVID and they needed some more cohesiveness in their team. So,
they actually got bought.
and they got bought and along in the process as well.
Mhm.
So they went and found about 2,000 square feet of their own space that made sense for them and still keeping their 100 plus employees. We've had another example where a company came to the US and they started out of our co-working facility and coming from Germany, brand new in the United States, and wanted to test it and see how it worked.
Mhm.
And they put 10 or so employees with us in the building and let it grow. And then they said, okay, now we're ready to launch. So they went and found their own space of about 10,000 square feet or so. And unfortunately, what we've heard from their employees is that they miss being in our co-working space.
Hmm.
And then you think, well, why? I mean, you've got this nice brand new space and it's in a gorgeous location, overlooks a nice bay view. And it's but we miss the environment. We miss the camaraderie and talking to you guys every day. And when we hear these examples, these are just two little examples, but they give us a taste of what is it that's missing in the corporate world, in the office place, that people are looking for, and intrinsically what's missed and overlooked.
Exactly. And I think it's not spending thousands of dollars on a indoor waterfall because it
Right.
brings nature into the insides. No, that's not going to bring people together or anything like that. And I think that's the issue that most corporate offices miss. They do not hit the mark of bringing people together. That's not their objective. Their objective has been to cram as many people into a building as possible in the most cost efficient way. Well, sorry to break it to everybody out there, those days are over. It's not something that is sustainable anymore. That's not how this world operates, not how humans operate anymore. And I think it's very much going to be now value driven, right? Because we've all heard of the corporate
Mm.
hoppers that jump from corporate company to corporate company, all in the same industry, or hell, even different industries. And really, at the end of the day, they choose which company they go to based off perks and environment and office space,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of it comes
Mm.
down to who has the coolest office, and coolest office tends to be what is the office that people tend to be more friendlier at, tend to be more welcoming, tend to be more open to stuff,
More
right?
socializing.
They tend to be the better experiences. It's not
Mhm.
about who has the shiniest column or the flashiest boardroom or anything like that. And a lot of it's come down to why does everybody praise the Google campus? Because it's promoted and with it had in mind collaboration, open work, ability to be free flowing and
Oh
have
yeah.
creative ideas. And that it wasn't about cramming as many people into a space. Even though you do hear about the horror stories sometimes from Google employees where they get half a cubicle and a chair and that's their desk, quote unquote.
Well,
I
you
think,
also, I mean,
go
I
ahead.
don't mean to cut you off, but you also got to think about part of that is what Google did was the initiative of you're going to spend majority of your time here already. Make it a comfortable space where you can be effective because you're not in the prison mindset, basically thinking of, all right, 10 minutes till 5 o'clock, and then I can leave, or I have another 2 hours left, and I gotta fight off this 2 o'clock sleepiness
Oh,
I got.
absolutely. And Google very intelligently as a company said, well, let's make it more comfortable for our employees. Why do we need to give them a reason to leave? Let's build a cafeteria that's got world-class food here. Let's build activities and have fun here as well as work here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we talk about the statistics of what it looks like as a environment basis. Your workplace is an environment you're spending about 60% of your lifetime at. I mean, honestly,
Right.
you're there majority of your life, majority of your
Of
day
your
in the
waking
work,
hours, yeah.
and with the exception of holidays, you're there and you're spending your time there. So they took that analysis of it. Okay, well, a home away from home should be still a place you can be effective. So they geared it more towards benefiting their employees to allow them to have amenities like the nap room and the catering of food on a constant basis, and also on top of that just the environment to allow them to have like recreational space to get their mind off work a little bit too. So all that involved is what created an environment that everybody raves about, and I think it's a great way to take it as a blueprint basis of where does a company start valuing their employees more.
True. And I
And you
think also, in addition to that, is what companies need to understand today's workforce has evolved in what in style of what we do for work. We no longer do the same functions, and that is greatly due to computers taking over and automating a great deal of what we do. So there are more typical white collar jobs, as you might say, than there are blue collar jobs. Both are necessary. We're speaking about the corporate world and the office structure in this case. But the types of office workers are no longer the same, and their need of what they're doing has evolved as well, which means their workspace and their surroundings around them has changed and what their needs are.
Yeah, and it's also it's funny too is like when people look at like the layouts of corporate offices, right? People wonder why they don't recognize certain things about amenities they may have in their corporate office because a lot of them are hidden and
Mhm.
on purpose because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want people to know about them there, that they're there. They want them to have the ability to know that it's an option, but when they want that option, how do they know where to get it? You know? And a lot of offices I think are laid out with again maximizing
Mm-hmm.
not I wouldn't even say productivity. I would say the ability to have the illusion of productivity
Right.
and to a lot of degrees. And it's
To
very
elaborate on what you're saying, we've had the benefit of being able to go to quite a few office buildings for various reasons and kind of check out what they're built, how they're built, why they're built, and we're also a bit geekish about it. So we like to go into buildings and analyze them to death and what we would like about it, what we would change about it, and what is just okay, how it could function better. And I think that's one of our strengths between all of us. We're terrible to go out to dinner with also because we like to analyze restaurants apart and tear them apart and their structure and design as well.
and it's I think a lot of people that have chosen offices, laid out offices, I would say don't have the outlook and the perspective that a building is a functional tool that we all use every day. It's not just a place where we all conveniently happen to be at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
And
also got to think about it too, is that you hear a lot of indifference about like employees talking about, oh, well, the company brand image is very family oriented and very much more centered towards the working class. But then their workspace is not even resembling any sort of brand identity to that, much rather the complete
True.
polar
Yeah.
opposite of it. So then you have a lot more of like employees questioning what is it that they
Yeah.
actually
Are
are
they
working for.
yeah,
authentically
Are they
being
actually
true?
being the
Yeah.
company that they is, and where does their purpose then lie in that? And that's
and
part of the brand identity, and the functionality of a office space comes into varying aspects of that, because whatever you're presenting to the outside should also be on the inside, and what's on the inside is where your employees are working, where your company is headquarters. And part of that is just that if you don't have the emotion there in the heart of it, how do you expect that emotion to come out in any part of you?
And to be fair, I believe strongly that office buildings were not constructed by people who were using them. They were constructed by people who were designing them. And I meaning the
it's
architects did it, the engineers did it based on what was functional for
or
the
not even
purpose.
that functional. What was permittable? That's like
Right.
that's the funny old saying in architecture. Architects build buildings that are permittable, not functional or design oriented. And it's that's like my bone to pick with a lot of architects these days. They're too afraid to be creative or present something because they're afraid of rejection or it not making the first cut and this and that. And like I understand that architect is a business, like being an architect, there's a business side of it, but at the same time, there's also responsibility with it because you're the buildings you're building are only as boring as you make them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of architects at this rate are become more industrial in this sense, have just become let's just pump it out and use a template, save time, this and that. And that's I guess great to an extent,
I mean, look at
but
the
it's
majority
not
of any Fortune 500 building concepts and building we see anywhere, any franchises. You look at, for example, McDonald's. They're one of the biggest, and they had a whole renovation to curves and bends to like the roof lines and some of the walls to now everything's blocked. Everything is literally gray and blocked, and it
Right.
is
yeah, and
much more
it's
like you said, the permeable or just a easy, simple drawing that you don't think too much about, and that plays a factor into the environment that you
and
have.
also
That comes honestly down to money.
yeah,
And if you want to label it in one thing, it doesn't give enough ROI on that investor's
The half,
part
yeah.
to say, is this worth it to me to have some design elements or to make it more work conducive?
exactly.
They don't think past that point because it's like, no, that's 25 more square feet that I could get more profit out of. So that's the
Exactly.
direction I'm going on it.
And it's funny too because the next thing I want to bring into this conversation is furniture. And a lot of companies won't, to your point, won't spend the money on furniture because it's the most quick thing to depreciate on your on your expense sheet,
Oh yeah.
Right.
right? So most companies say, I don't care what color it is, I don't care what it looks like. Can a person sit in it and can they work at that desk?
Or they more or less say, I don't care about any colors, make it monotone. I want black and
Exactly.
white and
But
nothing
then
else
they
in between.
also then wonder why no one wants to come into the office.
Yeah.
And sadly, as much it is, wanting people to come into the office is just as much important in the furniture that you pick, where you put it, what color it is.
Exactly. You
They-
have
they-
the coolest coffee machine in the whole world, but if it's in a black and white and gray office and nothing of interest or functional, no one's going to want to come. Doesn't
Exactly.
matter about
And
that.
it's something I sympathize with CFOs and people that have the budgets and in that aspect because
Those spreadsheet people.
yeah.
But also, I mean,
but
think about it
I
this
would
way.
say that like the furniture industry doesn't help themselves.
No.
Right? They don't help themselves when it comes to their pricing and the way they gouge. I would say to an extent, not all of them do it, but I would say when you also add a middleman in of dealers and you add in another thing of that, it only adds to the cost, right? It doesn't make it more amenable for people to get there,
And
right?
you're paying
And
for
then
somebody's paycheck at that point rather than paying actually for the product.
exactly. And it's not shade on the furniture dealer industry. It's more shade, I would say, on the manufacturers to a lot of degrees because a lot of it, that cost comes from the manufacturing cost, the retail price, and then on top of it, actually furniture dealers are nice because it allows you to see there's more than just one option out there, which is the great thing about, I would say, furniture dealers is they have access to a lot more people out there, and it's jumping into a swimming pool rather than walking through a river,
Yeah.
right?
It's very difficult, as we all know. And I say this because we had a moment in time where we had a issue where we couldn't get furniture in and we had to get it because we had people who needed desks. So we made them ourselves. So we have firsthand knowledge of what it is to make furniture and how that process goes and the steps involved in it, the labor intensity of it, the material sourcing of it, and the overall cost. And is it worth it to the bottom line of what you're doing it for? Does it make sense? And I can tell you firsthand, there are cheaper ways to make furniture and do things than what you can buy out there in general. However, 99% of the people are not going to sit there and make their own furniture.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
They're not going to spend that time to do it.
And we're not-
Assemble it, maybe.
And we're not even saying we're not promoting that. It's just it was something that we had to run into, and it was part of a roadblock and a challenge we ran into. But
Correct.
it gave us the insights as to the details that matter in furniture, and it's
The littlest things you can do to make it just slightly better.
exactly
We were fortunate to go to our furniture dealer and to go to their factory, and we got to do a tour of their innovation area. And this was several years ago, and the product has now since been launched. But it was a lot of fun to go in and see how things are developed. And we were talking to the actual designers and developers at that moment, and we said, well, this is a great thing. We would add such and such, and we told them some of the things we would add, or we would change this up a little bit, or could you make it so that it did this or did that? And they're like, well, yes, we could, but, and there always seemed to be a but behind it that prevented it. And I remember walking away from that going, I really wish they could take our comments to heart, because we're really talking from a perspective of knowing and seeing.
As an end user, as a person that
Right.
watches people use it, and it's very much the furniture you interact with at your office affects your productivity, whether people want to accept that or not. And it's also a big thing as to why people do not want to come into the office. And I'm not saying you add a comfortable chair here or there,
Right.
people want to come back into the office. I'm not saying
It's
that.
not just one thing.
It's accumulation, and it's being attentive as to why you're putting furniture in certain places and what space are you making this space. What's the intention? Do you want people to gather here? Do you want people to focus here? Do you want people to have that be their own private space? What do you want that space to be?
with
And then
intention. You said the right
You
thing.
also got to
go from
think
there.
about, I mean, it's not like the corporate world is unwilling to change. We went from cubicles to open floor.
Oh, huge change, Rami. Such a huge
It
change.
is a huge change, though. But you got to think
That's
about
right.
is it's more of a change that gets glanced over, because part of it is understanding, okay,
But
you're
was-
right, you want to put value into your employees, but like you said, it comes back to money, and how as a corporate company are you able to get the value back in your money? Because the ROI values exactly is what every investor is looking at.
But look
And so
at-
you got to think about is you're not just paying for the furniture, but you're paying for the longevity of employees. You're paying for the less turnover and the more time that's going to take required to interview and to also
And-
go through retraining and topics like that, versus having there's where your ROI is.
And
It's the investment on your employees again.
Exactly. And it's not just that, it also helps reinforce your culture.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a culture of you want accountability, you want people to take accountability for their stuff, put it into the micro things that they do in their day. Make it so your cleaning staff doesn't take care of the dishes in the sink. People have to clean their own dishes. Right? And that goes into design, layout. Are we getting a dishwasher? Are we not getting a dishwasher? Are we getting a cleaning service? What services are we getting? And there has to be a lot of intentional thought as to why you're doing certain things operationally. And I think having your office space, you can
Says the chief operational officer.
and you can translate your culture and the culture you would like through the environment that you design, lay out, pick out, and go from there. And it's really almost used as an enforcer to some degree. And
You're
it's-
absolutely right. It's true.
and it's very much like if you want people to be able to figure stuff out, right? Put instructions next to things, but at the same time make it self-serve, right? So people have to read instructions, and then okay, so I read the
But you know what's
instructions.
going to happen though? They're going to go turn around and go to the boss and say, "Hey, I don't know how to do this," and the boss would be
They
like,
do that one time, right?
They read-
But then
they read the
They do it a
instructions.
second time. The boss knows they already told him one time. They do it a third time. The boss knows they already told him twice, right? So it develops this thing of accountability and also a little bit of embarrassment to some degree. But that's if the culture, depending on the culture you're trying to have and develop. And that's the thing is you may design a space and not even realize you're developing a certain aspect of your culture until it's developed.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's in positive or a negative. And I mean, we've had those experiences in our space of realizing certain spaces were dead spaces when we intended it to be a dead space, but then we put furniture there and then all of a sudden it's revitalized.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's completely used differently.
That's part of the fun of what we have done and have been able to do on a small scale and a much larger scale is we get to beta test and move things around and then watch and observe how people react, what they do with it, what they feel about it. We've watched, for example, a space where got zero usage whatsoever to turn into the hub of activity just by moving some chairs into that area. And it all of a sudden promoted that feeling of let's stay a while. Let's sit here and have a conversation. This is kind of a cool place too.
Yeah.
Where it was designed intentionally to have that, but it was missing an element. And that was simply having those comfy chairs and the ability to do so.
And I think now companies have to big companies, I would say, have to make the decision of how do we accommodate our remote workforce, or how do we accommodate our current office situation, and make a decision. So I would say some of the things to use as part of your decision making is, one, how much of your team is remote and how much of it is local, where
Right.
you're headquartered. From there, it's okay, I have to service two different groups. I have to service my headquartering group, my group that's at my headquarters, and then my group that's remote, right? And with the remote people, it depends again completely how the company is run. If they are a company that wants to fly their remote people in once a month for a week or so, or whatever it may be to make sure they're in the office, that's completely on the company,
Mhm.
right? But they have to still take care of them on the times that they're not in the there at the headquarters. So what do you do for them? My recommendation: find a co-working space, and if you have a group of them in the same area or in the same city, get a office for the group of them that they can all check into, so they can at least have their own culture with that team,
Yeah.
right?
One of the smartest things one of our members companies had done was they analyzed their employees' zip codes of their residences, and they said, okay, this is where I have the largest collection of people, so this is where I think we should have an office space. And they found our space, and that's how they got to use ours specifically. But it was brilliant because it really spoke to the fact they were listening to their employees and what their needs were, and they didn't want to be that far from home. They want to be able 5, 10, 15 minutes at max drive to work, and they zeroed in on a demographic area that made sense to those people, and we were able to accommodate them. And I think something else we've seen in another group where similar, where you have a group of people that live in a close area, but then they need to work, and they don't want to go 45 minutes to the local office of where your company has put you, because that's not where they want to be. So they come down, they have a drop in where they can come use the office for a day. You may be here for the week because your teammates are here, but then you may not see them for another 3, 4 days, and they come back in, drop in for another day or so, and that works for them. It works really well. And I think more companies need to evaluate that in their office space. You can keep an office space for your company, evaluate that, what it looks like, narrow down the footprint, how many people are going to actually utilize it, how many do you really need it to utilize. Then come in and speak to people like us who can help you design that space to make it conducive for what the needs are. We're able to be flexible and scalable, so we can change furniture around. We can add team desks as opposed to individual desks. We can make circular, we can make square, round, whatever the cases that your needs are, we can accommodate it. And you can do so in your own company, but you need some help there sometimes. And going the standard route is no longer the best option. The workforce is going to balk at it, and they're not going to come in
Yeah.
if you
And
don't
you
do
also
it
got to
well.
kind of go back to why is that? What is the shift? Because it wasn't just COVID, it's been
Right.
coming before. And I mean, we are now in a new generation of workforce where the workforce that's coming into it is they grew up on computers and they grew up having an environment like a school environment that was more conducive for them to actually work on a computer and allow them to focus on their work online. And the generation that is, I'm not going to say coming out of the door, but that is learning to change and evolve are not understanding that because they didn't have that. They just
You're
what
right.
the
Yeah.
computer
Yeah.
was not the essential workspace. It was the meeting room. It was
The face to face
face
high
to
Yes.
face to
contact.
face,
Yeah.
exactly. And you're experiencing a clash of that where a lot of the older generation of workforce people are the seniors and the CEOs and the operation managers and everything else, and they're not understanding that concept and trying to
Right.
communicate to that point of, well, you have a new workforce that is much younger than you, that doesn't work, has never worked in an office like yours, and has more grown up in a space that is done more evolved, to say, for the new generation of
Right.
workforce.
Exactly. And it's companies at this point maybe scratching their heads. So how do I decide if I want to downsize, what does that look like, and how do I maximize space and all that? It's basically, think about it this way. Most companies now only have 40 to 50% of their whole workforce in the office at one time,
Yeah.
right? So you got to think about how many people can fit in your office space, or do you need to fit
Correct.
in your office space at one time? Don't think about your company as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
because the days of your whole company being in the office at the same time are dead.
Not dead, just
I'm
very rare.
on a consistent basis, day in, day out. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, yeah, you're still going to have your quarterly meetings, your monthly meetings, however a company may structure that. But I think the day in, day out course of 90 to 100% of your workforce being there at the same day, I think is over. Which you're seeing this huge commercial real estate pullback from landlords and leases and stuff like that. So I think companies need to now question when they re-sign their lease or are rethinking how much space they're taking, they need to think about how many people need to fit in a space that is 40% to 50% of our workforce, first off, because from there, that's how you do the hybrid work. You might do some teams are on 2 days a week and then off 3 days a week or whatever the schedule may be. But it's you'll always have a cycle of people, right? And then from there, you look into what is our office lacking? What are some basic things that people have been asking for in that office, right? It could be a new coffee machine. It could be a better break room. And these are just
It could be as simple as the type of toilet paper you have.
Tip of the iceberg
Going from one
requests.
ply to maybe 2 ply. If you really want to spend the money, go to 3 ply too.
And the reason why these are very cliched things and requests is because these are constant things that are not addressed by corporate companies and stuff like that.
True.
And I mean, also when it comes to amenities in your office space, again, it's on a culture basis. What do the people in your office all have in common, like, appreciate, or if it's something a company does as itself, right? And I'm not saying add a bowling alley just for the hell of it, just to say you have a bowling alley. But if your company sells bowling balls, right, and that's something
That would seem like a natural.
it would seem like a natural thing, amenity to have a bowling alley in your thing, right?
Right.
Or if you're a company full of people that are in a bowling league, right?
Right.
Something like that. That makes sense. But that amenity doesn't make sense for every company is what I'm trying to say, is that not every company needs a nap room, right? But I would say maybe a version of a meditation room or a quiet space to break out and just have some stress relief of some sort, some quiet time, that. And again, amenities, companies balk at certain amenities because they're like, why would we ever need that? And it's a valid thing because not every company is going to need every amenity.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've gone from the very Victorian era your employees are slaves. They work for you nonstop, as much as you can drive them, as hard as you can until they die. And then you go to, all right, we'll take care of them until they die. And then we'll give them the golden parachute, as they used to say. Which, do you guys even know what that is? Have you ever heard that?
A good severance package in
Yeah,
retirement?
exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever understand what it really means, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, because companies now, people don't stay with companies that long, for one, and they're not meant to be your lifelong employer. They're no longer taking the role, the position of being, I want to be your employer for life. I will take care of you, your family, and the generation behind you to come. They're like, no, I just need you now. Never mind about the future. And with that, so does the mindset of the employee. They no longer feel that company will be around for looking after them in the future. So why am I going to give them my all? Why am I going to be here for longer than I need to be? But yet, work still needs to get done. And our type of work, as I had mentioned earlier, has evolved and changed. So we have to evolve and change with that for what the needs are of the people that are actually doing the physical part of the work and the mental part of the work.
And it's very much people that are subscribed to the idea of the feng shui of a room. I mean, we'll really attest to this, that like it makes a difference. You could take your bedroom, rearrange your bedroom, and orient furniture differently, and it's a completely new bedroom to you, right? People don't see that about their office. They're like, well, it's just a square. Like, how could rearranging furniture make that much of a difference? How could that make a space more utilized?
I think you guys have learned that intimately.
Yeah, and it's very much, if I had $1 for every time somebody said that, I mean, we'd be very rich. And it's something that I think a lot of companies need to look past the budget. They need to look past the bottom line, right? I'm not saying break the bank, go over budget, this and that. I may be saying add a little bit more in the budget because your return on that is better because you have more productivity from your employees in the office. You also have more retention as well, so you're not also hiring and firing. And then on top of it, you're also getting the best out of your employees because they actually want to be in a space they want to be in.
Yeah, they
it's
enjoy
not something
it.
they're being forced to, and you'll slowly see people spending more hours at the office. Not because they're working harder necessarily, but they enjoy being there, which may lead to better work results. Just because you're working longer
or longevity with the company, you might stay there because you're more happy.
And the ROI on that is all those intangibles. And yes, it's a risk, just like any
It is.
investment. But the risk is low comparatively because at the end of the day, it's how you treat people, how you take care of people, right? And companies that understand that already and have done that throughout their culture of taking care of their employees and making it about the people, this is a no-brainer for them. And they've probably already adopted this, right? Whereas companies that haven't, they're probably scratching their heads. How do I get people back in the office? How do I keep retention? What does our office space look like post-COVID?
And
I
I
mean,
keep reading articles all about that throughout the CRE world. Is everyone's talking about, well, how do we get them back? How do we make them happier? How do we make them stay? And it's all these data-driven analytics they're trying to go to figure it out. It's human nature, and it does take some observation. It does take some uh, finessing of
Yeah.
the
And as much as I want to
the
scream at the
human
top of the
psyche.
rooftop, like how do you get to keep people back in the office is co-working spaces because that's what we do is co-working
well, yeah.
spaces. I also want to say is reconsider your office. Has your office changed in the last 5 to 10 years? Have
Right.
you redesigned it? Have you redone it? And people think, oh, we don't have the budget for that,
Well,
which
it's
is a valid thing. But at the same time, you still have to downsize or move out. And if you move out, you still have to move into a new place and then do the build out, do all this, right? So if you're going to do that, think first, be intentional first,
plan first.
plan first, communicate first, organize first.
I mean, also you got to talk about is like, what is the employee's needs? Because the employee's needs have also shifted and changed. And employees' needs, especially with COVID, what it brought about, as we talked about this before on one of our previous episodes, is it gave a need for family. People are not going to take away that value of family as they want to be closer to them. They want to be the more the family-oriented people, and especially in a suburb area, and especially when with be placed cities and towns, because you're talking about now that freedom that was taken away from them of having their time to be spent with their kids, with their wives or their husbands, to now having it again because they're remote working. They're able to value that time away from the office because they're with their kids, and when they come back to the office, whenever they need to, they're more energized, more motivated to do so. And one of the redesigns we as our co-working space is, it's a more family friendly. I'm not going to say it's a family oriented completely, but it is much more family friendly. You can have your spouse and your kids have come in for a little bit, have a chat with you, check on you, have some coffee while they're here. Just some small things that makes it simple to invite the family, have them a little bit of time here in a hybrid workspace where they're able to still see the people, see their family members, and still
Exactly.
also be able to be productive because it is a value to their employees. The value of their family is never going to be taken away, and some is more than less, some more than others. But at the same time, you're not. It's understanding who your employees are, what their needs are, what does that look like in an office space, and how do you do so?
Exactly. And I think, for example, like us having a mother's room is a very simple thing to do for us.
Mm-hmm.
Why? We're in the suburbs. We have a lot of working moms and new moms as
Oh, yeah.
well. And it's just a nature of being located in the suburbs. It's a byproduct of that. So that's why we have a mother's room. It may not be our most used amenity, and we don't even monetize off of it because it's an amenity. It's a space that is carved
Available.
out and thought out for that purpose because it plays into the bigger picture of what we value and what's important to our members and what we
Absolutely.
want to be part of our culture, right? So we want people to be able to work and have kids. That's something of our culture.
Yeah.
That's something we believe in. That's possible. And it's just not just possible, it's a necessity, right?
Absolutely.
So why build spaces where you're shuffling your women that are mothers off into the bathroom or into a dark closet or stuff like that?
Mhm.
And I think it should be a standard amenity, just like water fountains are to a lot of extent, right? It's something that should just be a no-brainer.
Oh, yeah.
And with that, it's being in the suburbs too, our amenities are going to be very different than a downtown co-working space,
Oh, yeah.
right? We may have some similarities.
I mean, one thing is you would want a more or less a bike parking space where you can put your bike that you rode to work
Yeah.
up and put that on a rack or a hanger of some sort that is designated for you
Exactly.
versus like a locker space that may be more designated to a full day outfit change and everything else versus that.
And even corporate offices can monetize from their employees about certain things, right? So if
Mhm.
you had some dead space and you wanted to do something, put some storage units in there,
Yeah.
right? And your employees can use that dead space for storage, or make it a monetized thing where you're allowing them to, keep their part or their bike there, right?
Yeah.
And it's safe, protected out of the elements and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, and it's worth monetizing, right? So there's ways also corporate companies, because I mean I've heard of plenty of financial institutions that are huge companies charge their employees for their private office that they have, and
Yeah.
it's taken out of their pension and stuff like that. And that's part of the reason how they pay for stuff like that.
I mean, if you want an example of a great company that's done exactly that, rethought their space, and this is from the farthest thing you would expect, but Fifth Third Banking, they take their banks now as the way they are, from being a front desk and cuddled up, like bunch of just small offices along the sides where their tellers are and their
Mm-hmm.
other people and their executives of the branch may be, right? And that's all you see. It's just a bunch of gray walls, a front desk with cold opening to people, to now we're seeing a little bit more of, I'm not going to say an co-working space, but more of an open workspace style
Uh-huh.
that is free for any of the any of the members banking with the bank chain, and allowing them to come in and have a more comfortable feeling, more open conversation with their banker, and a little bit more of a personal touch, like, hey, let's sit down, have a cup of coffee, and chat a little bit, because I'm here to take care of your money, and you're here to make sure
Rather
you
than
trust
the
me.
desk chair relationship.
I
Exactly.
think that's a great example too, because they did something that needs an industry that needs privacy.
Hmm.
So you still need those private offices, but
Oh
you
yeah.
don't necessarily need 8 of them in a building like that, in a bank branch. You need 2 or 3.
And you can alternate between them.
Right. And then having that atmosphere of how they've changed it up, it's besides it being just more welcoming, but it also helps bring the guard down, and you're not feeling as
Absolutely.
guarded, and you need to be more honest and true in your banking needs, because people are trying to help you there. They're not trying to harm you. So you are afraid to say too much or do too much because you don't want other people to hear or to know. Great. But the environment hasn't fostered the feeling of, I'm here to help you. I'm here to be your relationship partner, as most banks like to refer to
Yeah.
themselves as.
I mean, I know now a lot more bank tellers. Before, you would have, they said, oh, come drop by and visit anytime. Nobody would do so.
Yeah,
But
nobody
now in
had.
a space, I know there's in one of our local branches, they talked about, there's one guy who comes in every single day just to enjoy a cup of coffee and
Right.
have a
Because you
quick
feel so
chat,
comfortable,
because he feels so
right?
comfortable there. And that's great, though. I mean, if that's what you want, as out of, I mean, if you're looking to redesign a space and that's what your goal is, to intend for
Hmm.
people to come in and utilize it and be more active part of the company, that is a perfect thing you could ask for, as somebody coming on a
And
daily
Exactly.
that's
basis.
something that we do when we're doing some consulting with people, is to talk to them before we're looking or doing anything. We need to sit and understand what their business is all about, how they're wanting to run their business, what their intention is,
What
what
are
their
their
future
what are their
is,
struggles?
what they struggle with.
What's
Exactly.
something that they're not seeing that we're seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of laughing when you brought up the whole, like, from cubicles to open floor plan. I was like, all they really did was just brought the walls down, and
Yeah.
they weren't even
Yeah.
walls. I mean, it wasn't
But
it wasn't, I wouldn't say a net positive change.
And guess what? People don't want the open space.
Yeah, exactly. And
They would rather have the cubicles at this point than they would not have
to
it,
an extent, right?
right?
And I think it's that fine balance between having privacy and openness,
yeah.
right? It's that fine balance of humans want enough privacy to have their own space and
Hmm.
be comfortable, but people also want enough openness to not feel so isolated.
Some of our most used workspaces that we have are that they feel private, but they're not private. And it's interesting to us because we toyed with putting doors on that area or not, and then we decided not to, because in fact, it's utilized more than any other open space in the building. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they feel private enough that they can get work done, they can have private conversations if need be, but yet they still feel like they're part of something going on in the movement of the building. And that is an eye-opening experience when you're not used to it. And when we've been able to examine that and see it in other locations and how buildings are structured, we can see how you can tweak it and make it just a little bit better. You may have a great structure of a building, but it just has some walls in the wrong place, or it has some areas divided that could be better utilized.
And it's like, also, I know it sounds kind of weird too. It's like even investing in your coffee,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've stopped going to Dunkin'. Why? Because we have really good coffee. Like, I don't need to go to Dunkin' anymore or have the urge and
Right.
spend that few dollars to go at Dunkin',
It's
right?
funny. I had
It's
someone tell me today that they're not a coffee drinker, but they have their afternoon coffee here because it's just that good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's-
And I mean, you could translate into now people are getting into the office earlier and
yeah.
more on time because they're not making their coffee stop anymore because you have really good coffee at your office
Yep.
now.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
an amenity, and or you have clients who now look forward to coming to your office because you have a really good cup of coffee or a really good espresso or whatever the case may be. And those little things, they don't cost much. They don't take much. All it
Right.
takes is having some thought and some foresight.
And it's also a tangible thing that somebody can interact with and touch with that they can enjoy. That value of something tangible right now is much more needed because we live in a digital age where everything is more or less fugazi. Whatever is on the internet, it's a
Right.
feeling that you get. But
And
now if you're able to
exactly.
provide a actual tangible thing that they can enjoy, that they can have a good memory experience with, and the office space is just that. And you have to basically create that experience of tangibility of enjoyment because you want your employees to enjoy the space.
Yeah,
You want
exactly.
them to be able to enjoy
Think
it
about it this way.
so that they're presenting you as a brand, as a company, so much more better because they're enjoying it themselves.
And think about it this way. You think selling insurance is the most thrilling thing in the world?
No.
No. But they all try to coach people up and talk it up, saying there's so many opportunities, you build relations, and which you do, and which is great. But working in an insurance office, what's going to keep you motivated to keep working in insurance? Selling insurance or the environment that you're in?
Right.
Yeah.
It's more likely the environment you're in.
Oh yeah.
True.
And the people you work with and the people, their mood and attitude and feeling and everything will dictate very much the retention rate of a company
Oh
and
yeah.
the quality of employees of a company.
I mean, we'll keep on reinforcing it because that is your ROI. That is where, if you want to understand fully why you want to renovate your space or why you want to be able to actually pour back into your employees if they're going to leave you, well, no, you're limiting that. I'm not going to say you're going to take it out completely, but you are going to reduce greatly the amount of people that are going to leave you as a company because they have a want now to stay. They have a desire to work harder because, for one, you have worked harder yourself as an operator, as a manager, to provide back into your employees who are already working
Exactly.
for you. So then you have to then basically, that value is given to them and they value it. And if they don't value it, then they're not the right people. And it also makes that hiring and firing process a lot easier too on you as well. Because
Exactly.
they're not fitting in the community, they're not fitting in that environment that you've designed and created. It just shows they're not the right fit.
And again, we're not saying break the budget on furniture, amenities, coffee. That's not what we're saying. Spend within your budget.
reasonable.
But think about why you're doing certain things.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
just do it in the justification of, oh, it's below budget, we'll save a few $100 here or there.
Yeah.
If that's your goal, you probably should not be in business, in my opinion. Because again, I think the things that succeed in life are the things that provide value and consistent value, not just a one-time solution type thing.
And
Something
it
that-
can't be something that's just a fad. It's a passing interest that'll be gone in a couple of years.
For example, like cold plunges. We've teetered with the idea of putting a cold plunge in our building, right? And I think we're trying to figure out, is it a fad? Is it something here to stay?
Yeah.
Right? And I think saunas were that for a very long time. Having a sauna in our building, I would very much say it's become now a staple amenity in most gyms, most commercial gyms,
Oh yeah.
right? And also a lot of upscale spas
Mm-hmm.
and homes. People put personal saunas in their
Right.
homes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's
become
become
a
it's
lifestyle.
no longer a fad because there's also value in saunas, right? Whereas the cold plunge, not that there's no value in cold plunge, but it's a very specific type of
athletic.
need, right?
Yeah.
And you can do it for meditative purposes and just pure discipline purposes, which
Absolutely.
you can. But at the same time, I think itself and also people will decide, is it a fad? Is it something that actually brings value?
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's something, for example, like we have to wait and see if that's a good amenity to have.
Right.
Right? We may have our own biases towards it, but it's also our biases aren't what is needed.
Yeah.
Always. Right?
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of companies and people fall into the trap of they design a space in their eyes and their gaze
Of
but
what it would be
not
ideal.
for the function of the people using it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They want it to be aesthetic. They want it to be nice looking. And that's great. And you can have design and function
Go in hand, yeah.
go hand in hand. But I think too many people are worried about, oh, we want gold, or oh, we want this material or this aesthetic. Where, yeah, you're spending all your money in 1,000 square feet, but you have a 10,000 square foot building that's all monochrome and all looks the same,
Oh yeah.
right? And there's a lot of national co-working brands out there, right, that do that, and I think sometimes they get away with it.
I mean, you
But
gotta
I
also
would
like
say a lot of
just
the local operators, who I'm a big proponent of, and I think do a lot better job than a lot of national co-working brands. They do a lot better job of design, function, and use than I would say your large national co-working brands.
yeah. I mean, you got to take a look at basically revisit the image of what an office is as a product to your employees as a company you're providing. So you got to take a look at product engineering of what that looks like. When you're building the product, you're not your design is part of it, but you're looking first, will it function? How will it function? Okay, we got the functionality out of it. Now we can dress it up. Now we can design it look nice, aesthetic. We can do that. And I think that's a big thing that is overstepped. It's looked at design first. It looks aesthetically nice. Okay, fit the function in then. That is so much
Yeah,
harder
function is always
going to
treated
be
as
try
last.
to work around, and you're creating barriers and roadblocks for yourself that makes it even more difficult to try to accomplish that, because now you're not focusing on what is it actually doing, you're just focusing on the look of it.
Exactly. And I think honestly, I'll openly say this, like, if I'm gonna lead a warpath on something, it's my warpath against squares and rectangles.
I never
it's-
thought I'd hear that.
It's something that I think is a building killer. It's something that kills creativity. Yeah, it's permittable, but you know when it's also permittable? An octagon, you know, a triangle,
A hexagon.
a hexagon,
A trapezoid.
a trapezoid.
A
Those
circle.
circle.
Non 90 degree angles.
I think the life of a square or a rectangle has come to its end.
Well,
for,
there's
for
no.
buildings.
There's
I'm not
always a
saying there's
place
not a
in
place
there's
for 'em
always
in
a
the
time
world.
and place.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's not a place for them in the world, but I would say, and especially in downtown skyscrapers, and I would say commercial buildings.
2 squares in a square. 2 rectangles in a square.
I
also-
think that is the main culprit of a lot of these restrictive corporate spaces that are very much limited to their skeleton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say I would implore architects, implore developers, implore
Engineers.
implore landlords.
You can
Own-
still
owners.
get a great NOI. You can still get a great DSC. You will be fine.
You might even
Exactly.
get more than what you're already
And
getting.
you may be spending a little bit more in construction, but at the end of the day, we all know construction will have to catch up with us, not the other way around. And
Yeah.
that's how it will forever always be until robots take their jobs, which I'm very much hoping. But
That
Besides-
is a podcast for another day.
besides that point, I implore people to push the limits of what a building can be and is, and very much
Totally agree.
let your imagination go wild when you're rethinking your office space for your team, for yourself, for your future company.
Yeah.
I think people should be very much implored to do that. It's their responsibility.
I mean, you gotta it's simple, allowing people to understand and just research a little bit more about what is it you're trying to achieve, what is it you're trying to come across as. I mean, there's so much research done and so much data looked over when it comes to sales, right? Spend that just a quarter or a fraction of that same research and time spent in data on your workspace, and you will see a result that you wouldn't expect, which is much more productivity out of your employees, much more effectiveness out of them, much more communication, much more ability to do more. And you're also going to see a lot more of those sales go up, because now you have an environment that's looking the part that you are as a company, as a brand, which makes it an easier sell for anybody that's working in there. I mean, you
Or
look
thinking about wanting to work there.
Yeah.
You could have some of your top talent you're trying to poach, but they won't come to you because your office is still stuck in the 90s.
And you know what? That change of the design and the office space it will be one of those tilt to the scales in favor of you or not when it comes to like benefits and your amenities, because you may not have the full health coverage insurance, but you know what though, you have a space that is safe for them, you have a space that is productive for them,
You
and a
could
space for
add,
their family, and you
and to that point, you could add an amenity that is pro health,
yeah,
right? Adding a gym, adding a sauna, adding
so they have
adding
a
some
less
kind
need to
of
be in and out
yoga
of a
room,
hospital or anything like
you
that.
know?
Right.
So you add these things that help curb your health insurance plans that you provide for your
Or you
teams.
provide a nice cafeteria space that is
That has
promoting health
healthy food
food.
options, or
Yeah.
you strategically put yourself next to food places that are healthier, right? Or partner with a vendor that promotes healthier stuff. And there's all these little things that you can kill so many birds with limited stones, right?
Yeah.
That it accomplishes so many different things just by planning, organizing, and communicating. Like it's very
And with that, we have come full circle to the end of our podcast. So glad you joined us all today. Speaker's Corner Rants will be resuming on another day.
I think it is. I mean, last point though, it is there is so much growth still to be had, and I think I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the commercial office space, because I think people are starting to understand that. I think they're really understanding that there is a benefit to reimagining what you look like as a company in your
and
office space.
it's almost
Very
one of those
true.
like I would say large organism realizations because you have people in opposite parts of the world saying the same things and they're not
Oh
even
yeah.
talking to each other,
Oh yeah.
right? So it's not something that's
No,
just
it's a humankind issue.
it,
It's not
it's
a
yeah,
country.
it's very much a human
It's
consciousness issue that has been inflicted on majority of the human race.
Yeah.
So
Um,
it's
it's
there's a way
exciting.
out of it,
Yeah. It's definitely
and
exciting stuff. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're gonna see how creative people will think outside of the box for hybrid work solutions and
yeah.
remote work solutions, and
Then we look forward to being your disruptor of the
yeah,
future in that space.
I'd like to
very
see
much so.
maybe even a trend setter.
I
So
think we're already there.
Trend setting.
I think we're there
maybe we'll see.
on our way to disruptor. So
Thank
But,
you again, guys.
yeah, and with that, we'll see you next time.